Most guys over 40 think they need to train 5 or 6 days a week to get jacked, but that's exactly why they stay stuck. My clients in their 40s, 50s, and 60s are gaining muscle fast, training just twice a week with full body workouts, and this is the same method I use to take my body from this to this. So in this video, I'll walk you through the full routine, including exercises, sets, and reps, and then explain the 4 reasons why this plan works so well for men over 40. So what does full body twice a week mean? Well, it's very self-explanatory. Full body twice a week is a workout split where you simply train your entire body twice a week. So fundamentally, the way that this works is that you're gonna have a workout A, which you're gonna do on Monday or Tuesday, and then you're gonna have a workout B, which you're gonna do on Thursday or Friday. The idea is that you wanna leave 72 hours between sessions. So here's the structure that I recommend for these workouts. So I recommend that you have 6 exercises per workout, and then you want to do 3 compound exercises, and then 3 isolation exercises. So in any effective workout program, you should have a balance between compound exercises and isolation exercises. And fundamentally, those are the 2 different types of exercises that you can do in the gym. And so compound exercises are movements that work multiple joints and muscle groups at a time, whereas isolation exercises are movements that work a single joint and muscle group at a time. And so when you're doing your training sessions, you always want to make sure that you start with the compound exercises and then finish with the isolation exercises. And the reason being is because compound exercises are far more effective for building muscle and strength compared to isolation exercises. They serve different purposes. The purpose of compound exercises is really to build the bulk of your physique. Like these are the movements that are going to be responsible for developing 80 to 90% of the muscle mass that you're capable of gaining. And then the isolation exercises are the icing on top of the cake. They're the movements that are supposed to plug the gaps that might be left by these compound exercises. So that's the way that I like to think about the difference between compound exercises and isolation exercises. The compound exercises, which you do at the beginning, are your bread and butter. Those are going to be responsible for most of your physique development, and then you want to finish off each workout with a couple isolation exercises to hit your weak points and plug the gaps left by the compound exercises. And then as far as sets per exercise, you're literally going to do 2 sets for every single exercise. And the reason being is because when you train hard, which means bringing a lot of effort into each set and pushing each set close to failure, you do not need much volume in order to stimulate muscle growth. So now that you understand the full body twice a week structure in terms of how the workouts are actually laid out, we need to talk about how to actually choose the exercises that you're going to use in those routines. And that's where a framework I've created called the Core 6 comes into play. So the Core 6 is an exercise selection framework that completely cuts through the noise and demystifies exercise selection and actually makes it very simple. So the reason why it's called the Core 6 is because there are 6 fundamental movement patterns that exist for human beings. So we have squats, we have hip hinges, we have vertical pushes, we have vertical pulls, we have horizontal pushes, and then we have horizontal pulls. So basically, a squat is obviously a squatting movement of some kind, a hip hinge is a deadlift of some kind, a vertical push is an overhead press of some kind, a vertical pull could be a chin up or a pull up or a lat pull down, a horizontal push is a chest press of some kind, and then a horizontal pull is a rowing movement of some kind. So the idea here is to pick a big compound exercise for each of these movement patterns, and that's going to make up your Core 6. And these are really going to serve as the foundation of your workout routine. These are going to be like the main movements that you're really striving to master and get really, really strong at over time. And honestly, like the quality of your physique in terms of how good you look and how much muscle you carry will always be in direct proportion to how strong you get at these different exercises. And so in a minute, I'm just going to lay out some examples of Core 6 movements, but the idea here is not to, be dogmatic and be like, oh, there's only 6 movements that actually work. That's not the idea. The idea is that this sort of serves as like a framework, right? It serves as a guideline of like what movement patterns you need to focus on and what should really populate your routine. I'm not going to sit here and say that there's one best exercise for each of these movement patterns because that's not true. The way that I see exercise selection is that exercises are tools in your toolbox. And so someone who is building some shit isn't going to go into their toolbox and be like, oh, this tool is better than that one. It's like, no, it's context dependent. It depends on what you need the tool for. So the idea here is that you pick one big compound exercise. Again, I'm going to give you some examples in a second for each of these movement patterns, and you want those movements to be movements that work really well for you and your body structure, and you want them to be movements that you really enjoy. So for example here, I could tell you that for a squat, you should do a barbell back squat, but maybe a barbell back squat is not well suited to your body structure. Maybe you'd be better off doing a leg press, you know what I mean? Maybe for a horizontal push, I could try and tell you to do a flat barbell bench press, but if that exercise does not work well for you, then you'd be better off finding something different. So here's some examples of core 6 movements that you could do. So for example, if you're trying to pick a squat movement pattern, you could do a barbell squat, you could do a leg press, you could do a belt squat, or you could do a hack squat. For hip hinges, you could do a conventional deadlift, you could do a Romanian deadlift, you could do a stiff-legged deadlift. For vertical pushes, you could do a dumbbell overhead press, you could do a barbell overhead press, and you could do a machine overhead press. For a vertical pull, you could do a chin-up, or a pull-up, or a lat pull-down. For horizontal pushes, you could do a barbell bench press flat, you could do a barbell incline bench press, you could do a dumbbell press, both flat or incline, or you could do dips. And for a horizontal pull, you could do barbell rows, dumbbell rows, cable rows. The options are endless. And so the idea is to figure out which of these movements for each of these movement patterns works really well for me, what do I enjoy, and then those are going to form the foundation of your workout routine. Those are going to be your core 6. And then once you have picked a big compound exercise for each of these movement patterns, then it's going to make it really easy to create your workout routine. Now, this is for the core 6, which is the compound exercises. These are really like the most important exercises that you're gonna do, but as I said earlier, any effective workout program should have a balance between compound exercises and isolation exercises. So as far as how to pick isolation exercises, it's very simple. It all comes back to remembering why we use them to begin with, which is to plug the gaps left by these core 6, left by the compound exercises. So you just simply have to look at your physique and be like, okay, I'm doing these core 6, but what smaller muscle groups might be lagging behind? Maybe my biceps are lagging behind. Maybe my calves are lagging behind. Maybe my side shoulders are lagging behind. Maybe my neck. And that's where you want to allocate some isolation work, right? So the idea is just to pick movements that are going to plug the gaps left by these movements and that are going to bring up the weak points that you might have. By the way, guys, if you want my personal help putting this into action for yourself so you can pack on muscle, build strength, and feel proud of what you see in the mirror, click the link in my description below and book a free call with me. On that call, we'll break down where you're at right now, what's keeping you stuck, and then map out a step-by-step plan to get you where you want to be. There's absolutely no pressure whatsoever on this call. It's just a real conversation to see if I can help or not. And whether you join or not, you'll leave with clarity and a path forward. So now that you understand the workout split and the structure that each workout will follow, and you've picked your core 6 exercises along with some isolation exercises for your weak points, we need to talk about how to actually conduct the sets. So like I said earlier, for all the exercises in the routine, you're going to do just 2 working sets. And as far as how many reps to do on each of these sets, honestly, anything between 5 and 20 reps will stimulate muscle growth as long as you push the sets hard and progressively overload them and add weight to them over time. So anything between 5 and 20 works, but I've found that for compound exercises, generally 6 to 12 reps per set works best. And then for isolation exercises, it's usually anywhere from 8 to 20 reps per set. Now, obviously that's a little bit vague and that's not actually going to tell you much about how to conduct the sets. So I want to talk about a training method I've coined called the polarity training method. And this is going to break down how to actually conduct these 2 sets. So there's so many different ways that you can conduct sets. A lot of people are fans of straight sets across where you do the same weight on every single set. Some people like doing pyramids where they start light and then they work their way up. The way that I like to do it is with these 2 sets, I prefer to do the first set as the heaviest set and then the second set a little bit lighter. So for example, let's say that for your first set, you're going to be doing 6 to 8 reps. And then for your second set, you're going to do 8 to 10 reps. So the way I like to do it is I like to warm up to this heavy set. And as you can see, these are 2 different rep ranges, and that's how I like to do it. I like to warm up to one really heavy set that's a little bit lower in reps. And then I like to rest, and then I like to take off about 10% of the initial weight and then go for a couple more reps. So it's like a top set followed by a back down set. And the reason why I really like this training style is because if you're pushing your sets really hard, which means close to failure, you're usually not going to be able to replicate that same performance on the following sets. So I really enjoy this training style because it sort of accommodates the natural performance drop off that you have in your training. So if you're just doing straight sets across, like a lot of people do, I find that usually after that first set, you can't really replicate the same performance. Like if I'm doing straight sets, I'll usually fall out of the rep range that I was aiming for in the follow-up sets. Whereas if I can just focus on doing one really heavy set and then not have to worry about doing that again by taking some weight off and going for a couple more reps, then it creates a very good psychological effect. And I also find that when you're doing straight sets or pyramid training, a lot of times you kind of hold back a little bit. So like if I'm doing 2 sets of say 200 pounds on a given exercise, that first set, I'm not probably gonna push it as hard as I could because in my mind, like in the back of my mind subconsciously, I know I'm gonna have to do that weight again. So I'm gonna hold myself back a little bit. But if I know I only have to do that heavy set first, and that's the only heavy set I'm doing, then I can really unleash maximum intensity and focus into that set and not have to worry about having to do another set of that same weight later on. I can just sort of relax, take some weight off, and go for a couple more reps. So obviously this is just an example. You don't have to do 6 to 8 reps and the 8 to 10 reps. That definitely works well, but it's just an example. As I said, if you're doing compound exercises, try to be within 6 to 12 reps. If you're doing isolation exercises, that's gonna be anywhere from like 8 to 20 reps. This is just an example for you of how I would conduct the polarity training method. And this is mostly for compound lifts. If you're doing isolation exercises, that's where I recommend that you just do simple straight sets across. And that's basically where, you're gonna do 2 sets and then maybe it's for 8 to 10 reps. You're literally just gonna use the same weight for both sets. The reason why I like that for isolation exercises is because they're not that strenuous, and honestly it's kind of a pain in the ass to like constantly change the weight. So like I said earlier, the isolation exercises are just the icing on top of the cake, so you don't need to worry about them too much, but I just prefer doing simple straight sets across for those. And then for the compound exercises, for those 2 sets, I prefer to do 1 heavy set followed by 1 lighter back down set where I drop the weight about 10%, give or take. Now, as far as rest time, I recommend that for compound exercises, you rest about 3 to 5 minutes per set, or between sets rather. And then for isolation exercises, you only need about 1 to 2 minutes between sets. Anything less than about 3 minutes of rest between sets for compound exercises is insufficient for muscle growth. And the reason being is that if you do a really heavy set of squats, for example, and then you try and get into another set 1 minute later without having given your body enough time to rest, you're not going to be able to push that hard on that second set because you didn't give your body enough time to recover. So you want to rest long enough to the point where you can replicate sort of the same level of intensity that you did in the previous set. And for compound exercises, to be able to do that is usually between 3 to 5 minutes. If you're doing like an upper body movement, usually 3 minutes is fine. If you're doing like squats or deadlifts, usually you're gonna need closer to 5 minutes if you're pushing the sets really hard. And then as far as isolation exercises, as I said, they're just not as strenuous as compound movements, so you only really need about 1 to 2 minutes of rest between those. Now, for all of these sets, no matter like whether you're doing the polarity training style or you're doing the straight sets across, whatever, you need to make sure that you are pushing your sets to 0 reps in reserve. This is critically important. So pushing your sets to 0 reps in reserve just means pushing your sets to where you can no longer move the weight despite exerting maximal effort, right? That's kind of what it means to train close to failure. It just means squeezing out every rep that you can do using good form, right? And so that's really, really important. That's kind of crucial for actually stimulating muscle growth because pushing your sets close to failure is what creates the necessary stress required to actually stimulate growth. So if you're doing 2 sets, but you're leaving like 4 to 5 reps in the tank on both sets, this is not going to work. In order to make fewer sets work, you have to push them much harder. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later in this video, but just keep this in mind for now, that whenever you're doing any of these sets, you do not want to rack the weight, so to speak, until you have squeezed out every single rep that you can do using good technique. So now that you understand how to actually conduct the sets, we need to talk about how to warm up for these sets. So my philosophy when it comes to warming up is to do the minimum amount required in order to get into your working sets. And you only need to warm up for the first exercises that you're doing. So if you remember the workout structure I showed you from earlier, each workout is gonna start with 3 compound exercises. And for those 3 compound exercises, you're likely going to need to do anywhere from 1 to 3 warm-up sets. And I'm not a fan of doing general warm-ups to where you walk on the treadmill for 5 to 10 minutes in order to break a sweat and then get into your working sets. I don't really like doing that. I prefer to do specific warm-ups. And specific warm-ups are where you just do a couple light sets, ramping up to the working sets on that specific exercise that you're doing, right? So the way that I typically like to do this, let's say that we're going into squats at the beginning of the workout. Before I get into the 2 working sets, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look at how much weight I'm using on that first heavy working set, and then I'm going to do my first warm-up set at 50% of that weight for 6 reps. And you don't even really need to rest too much between warm-up sets. If I'm doing like my first warm-up set, usually I just get straight into the second one. And for the second warm-up set, I typically like to do 70% of my first working set weight for 3 reps. Now, for most people, this is kind of all you need. I found 2 warm-up sets to be kind of the sweet spot, but if you're someone who needs a little bit more warming up and you wanna do like a 3rd warm-up set, I'd recommend doing 80% of your first working set weight for 1 rep. And then this is when you would take like 3 minutes of rest and then begin your working sets. Now, it's really important to note, you do not have to do this for the isolation exercises that are at the end of the workout. You only need to do this at the beginning of the workouts when you're warming up for those big compound exercises, because obviously that's when you're starting the workout, so you need to get your body prepared. And a lot of people don't really understand the purpose of warm-ups. The whole purpose of warm-ups is just to get some blood flowing into your muscles, and then also to get you psychologically prepared. Because let's say I'm going into doing sets of 315 pounds with squats. If I just jump straight into that 315, that's gonna feel really heavy. But if I take my time and hit some lighter warm-up sets where I'm ramping up to that 315, you know, by the time I get to like the 80% of 315 for 1 rep, I'm already going to have gotten myself psychologically prepared to get into the 315. Whereas if I just jump straight into it, that's gonna feel really heavy. And this is especially important as you get older. That's why I'd recommend to really listen to your body, right? So some people are gonna need only 1 warm-up set for certain exercises. Other people might need 3. You really wanna listen to your body and only get into your working sets once you feel like you are physically and psychologically prepared to do so. So by now you should understand the workout split, you should understand what exercises you're going to do in those workouts, you should understand how to conduct the sets and how to warm up for those sets. Now, the only thing we need to cover now is how to progress. So everything that we just covered is incredibly important, but none of it matters unless you have a progression system in place to help you get stronger over time. Because fundamentally, if you continue lifting the same weights, you will continue to look the same and you will not gain any muscle mass. So you need to have a system in place to guide your progression over time, to tell you when it's time to add some weight or when it's time to add some reps. And so this is where I recommend a progression system called the double progression method. So let's take an example from earlier of, let's say we're doing squats, and we're gonna be using the polarity training method that we talked about earlier. We're gonna be doing 6 to 8 reps on the first set, and then 8 to 10 reps on the second set. Now, the way that the double progression method works is that you're going to be progressing with both reps and weight. So as you can see here, there's a rep range that you're going to be working in, whether it's 6 to 8 or 8 to 10. And that's actually what you're going to use to guide your progression. So let's take this example of, let's say that after this video, you go into a workout and you're following this structure and you're gonna do squats. And let's say you're going to do 200 pounds on your first working set. And since the rep range is 6 to 8, let's say that you're going for 6 reps on this first workout. On the next workout, so the week after this, you're going to try to get 7 reps. And then in the 3rd week, you're still gonna be with 200 pounds, and then you're going to try to get 8 reps. And once you've hit 8 reps, you have hit the top end of the rep range, and that's why this rep range exists. So once you've hit the 8 reps, what you're going to do in the 4th workout is that you're going to go up to 205 pounds. So you're gonna add 5 pounds to the bar, and what you're gonna do with the reps is you're gonna drop back down to the bottom of the rep range, which is 6 reps. And then you're literally just going to repeat this process continuously. So in the next workout after that, you're literally just gonna go up to 7 reps. and then 8 reps. And then once you hit 8, then you're gonna go up to 210 pounds, right? So it's very, very simple. This is all most of you guys are ever going to need when it comes to progression. This is all you have to do. So just make sure that with the sets that you're doing within the workout routines, you're always working within a rep range, and you're basically treating it as like when you hit the top end of the rep range, that's when it's time to add some weight. And the reason why you then drop to the bottom of the rep range is because if you add 5 pounds, chances are you're not just gonna be able to get the same amount of reps. Like if right here with 200 pounds, you add 5 pounds and go up to 205, you're not just gonna get 8 right away, right? It's a slow progression. You have to work up to it. That would be amazing. And in fact, if some of you guys are brand new to weight training, you might be able to do that for maybe the first like few months. That's called linear progression. But for most of you guys, the more realistic path is to do the double progression, to where you're working in a rep range, you're starting at the bottom of the rep range, you're working your way up over the weeks, and then once you hit the top end of the rep range, you add 5 pounds, drop to the bottom of the rep range, and then work your way back up again over time. So now I've taken everything that we just covered and put it into an example workout routine for you with the exercises selected and the amount of sets that you're gonna be doing and on what days, right? So here's an example of a workout A and a workout B. So if you're wondering, the way that I chose to split these workouts up is, if you remember, we had our core 6 movements, right? So the way that I like to split up those core 6 movements, which obviously make up the first 3 exercises of each routine, is on the workout A, I like to do the squatting movement, then I like to do the vertical pull, the vertical push, and then the 3 isolation exercises. And then on the workout B, I like to do the horizontal push, the hip hinge, and then the horizontal pull. So that's my favorite way to split it up. The reason I'm telling you that is because if you pick different movements than the core 6 that I selected, then it's important for you to know how to actually split those up. So that's the sort of skeleton, that's the structure or framework that I would recommend. Here's an example of the routine. So basically I picked barbell squats, and with that, you're gonna be doing 2 sets. You're gonna be doing chin-ups for 2 sets, overhead press for 2 sets, and then for the isolation exercises, I picked tricep extensions for 2 sets, calf raises for 2 sets, and then face pulls for 2 sets. And then on the workout B, we have bench press, we have Romanian deadlifts, we have barbell rows, and then for the isolations, we have barbell curls, lateral raises, and then ab crunches. So you can see how this has progressed on itself, right? So we started off by picking out the core 6 movements, and then once you have selected those, all you gotta do is then split it up into the 2 workouts, and then you simply gotta pick a few isolation exercises per workout in order to plug the gaps left by these compound exercises and make sure that you're bringing up weak points. So there you have it, guys. It's that simple. That's basically how I would craft a workout program for you if we were working one-on-one. This whole core 6 framework and then like the split makes it so that you have a very well-balanced routine, right? So your bases are entirely covered with this setup, and now all you got to do is execute. So now you've seen the entire plan laid out for you, and it's probably starting to make sense. But the question is, why does this full body twice a week setup work so well for men over 40? Well, there are 4 different reasons, and the first and most important reason is better recovery. So the magic of full body twice a week is that it provides you 5 days of full rest every single week. And that might sound crazy to you because most routines that you see on the internet will advocate for 4 to 6 workouts per week and very little recovery time. But this sort of flips that on its head and actually gives you way more rest days than training days. And it is my belief that when you're over 40, you want to have more rest days than training days each week. And the reason being is because muscle is not built in the gym. It is built outside of the gym during rest and recovery. Too many men over 40 train too often. They're in a constant state of overtraining. They don't give their bodies enough time to actually recover and grow, because they're in the gym all of the time. So they're constantly breaking their bodies down without giving them the chance to actually rebuild bigger and stronger. And again, rebuilding bigger and stronger happens outside of the gym, not in the gym. So if you're in the gym too much, you're simply not going to recover and grow. So what's beautiful about this full body twice a week setup is that it strikes the perfect balance between stimulus and recovery. So if we take this example here and we compare 2 workouts a week to 5 workouts a week, on Monday, let's say we're hitting our workout, right? That's what the check mark is for. And then on Tuesday, that's when you're gonna rest. Wednesday, you're gonna rest. And then Thursday, you're gonna hit another workout. And then you're gonna rest again. And then you're gonna rest. And then you're gonna rest. So basically, you're stimulating growth on Monday, and then you're giving yourself 2 full days of rest before you hit the next session. And this is going to allow you to recover between the session and actually give your body a chance to grow from the stimulus that you created. If you train on Monday and you're back in the gym on Tuesday, you're not going to have giving your body a chance to recover, man. Like this, for some reason, this doesn't click for most people. And it's like, it's common sense, man. You cannot recover from a hard session the next day. You need to have rest days between your sessions in order to actually give your body the chance to recover and actually grow from the damage that you created in the gym. So look at this, you have fucking 5 full days of rest every single week, man, and it's magical. Now let's compare that to 5 workouts a week. Okay, Monday, train, Tuesday, train, Wednesday, train, Thursday, train, Friday, train, and then, okay, maybe Saturday and Sunday you take some days off. But what about all this time? Where's the recovery time? Where's the growth happening? There's no time for growth. Like it just pisses me off, man. Like this is common sense, and yet people are so skeptical about 2 workouts a week. It's like, bro, I mean, it's fine. Like when you look at it like this, it's like it just makes complete and utter sense, man. If you're training on Monday, you're not going to be recovered for Tuesday, and you probably not even be recovered for Wednesday. And then what are you doing? You're training every single day. And you're only giving your body a chance to sort of rest on Saturday and Sunday. And by then it's too late, man, because you just damaged the shit out of your body from Monday to Friday. So many guys over 40 tend to think that more is better. They think they need to train more to gain more days in the gym, more exercises, more sets. But that mentality does not apply to weight training. You know, in many facets of life, the more is better mentality is actually true. A lot of times you have to do more to get more. But it's when people carry this more is better mentality into weight training that it absolutely fails them. And the reason being is because weight training, when done properly, is incredibly strenuous on your body. And you, as a man over 40, have a limited ability to recover from that strenuous training. And it is for that reason that more is not better, but less is actually more. Okay, and this is something that I learned a long time ago at this point, like over 8 years ago, like when I first got into weight training, I too fell victim to this mindset. I thought you had to train more to gain more. Like my first year of training was spent dicking around on bullshit. I was training 5 to 6 days a week. My workouts were like 2 hours long. And after a year of doing that, I was like sure, I got some results because you have that newbie gain effect to where you're so new to the stimulus of weight training that literally anything works. But I felt like for the amount of time I was investing into the gym, my results were mediocre. I was expecting more. And it was after a year where I sort of took a step back and reevaluated things, and I actually started to train less. I went from 5 to 6 workouts a week down to just 2 to 3. And when I did that, I started seeing the best results of my life. And what I realized was that when I was training 5 to 6 days a week, I was never recovered. I was constantly breaking my body down without giving it time to actually rebuild bigger and stronger. So when I cut down to doing just 2 to 3 workouts a week and I left rest days between those sessions, all of a sudden I started gaining muscle and I started getting stronger every single workout because I was no longer in a state of overtraining. I was actually allowing my body the time that it needed to recover and grow. And the thing is, guys, after 40, your recovery ability is even more limited. So if I experienced that as a kid, what do you think that means for you as a man over 40? Your recovery ability is even less than that of a 20-year-old or even younger, right? So you have to keep that in mind. Most men over 40 just train too often and do not recover enough. They're just breaking their bodies down constantly without giving their bodies a chance to rebuild bigger and stronger. Now, the second reason why this full body twice a week setup works so well for men over 40 is better intensity. So if you train too often, you go into your workouts unrecovered, like we just talked about, right? And that doesn't only affect your ability to recover and grow from your workouts, it actually leads to shittier workouts themselves. Because what happens is that when you go into your workouts unrecovered, it leads to decreased effort. You cannot push the sets and exercises that you're doing as hard because you're simply unrecovered because you trained the day before. So I'll go back to the story that I just told you, which was my discovery of how less was actually more and that I got better results training 2 to 3 times a week as opposed to 5 to 6 times a week. Not only did I see faster muscle growth as a result of having more rest days, but I also realized that I approached my workouts completely differently when I had more rest days between the sessions. So before, when I was training 5 to 6 days a week, I didn't know it at the time because it's all I knew because I had only had experience training 5 to 6 days a week, but I was basically going through the motions in those workouts. I wasn't pushing myself hard because subconsciously I knew how much working out I had to do throughout the week. And my body was not recovered enough to be able to push hard because I was in the gym every day. right? And so when I reduced my training frequency and I started working out 2 to 3 times a week, I went into my workouts fully recovered, and that allowed me to tap into this new level of effort and intensity that I didn't know existed. And that led to better results because I was able to actually push hard and push close to failure. Whereas before, I was just going through the motions because I was tired. I was not recovered enough to be able to hit that session. So my workouts were shit. They lacked quality. I was just half-assing the work the entire time. So this is what I see with so many guys over 40. Most men are training at about 50% of their true capacity because they are always in the gym. If most men were to give themselves more rest days, they would be able to push themselves way harder because they'd be going into their workouts fresh and recovered as opposed to fatigued from the previous workout. And I'm not only talking about muscle recovery here because muscle recovery is only one piece of the pie. And in fact, I think it's actually less important than CNS recovery. So your central nervous system is the mechanism responsible for recruiting your muscles to produce force and push hard. And from a hard training session, it takes about 48 to 72 hours for your CNS to fully recover. And I've seen that with older men, it's closer to 72 hours. So basically, if you're training on Monday, and then you're training on Tuesday, your CNS is fried. You're not going to be able to push the Tuesday workout very hard because your CNS is not recovered. And your CNS, remember, is what's responsible for actually allowing you to push hard and to recruit your muscles to produce force. So you need both your muscles to be recovered and your CNS to be fully recovered in order to train with maximum effort. And this is why with so many of my clients, before they start working with me, they're training 5 to 6 days a week, and then they cut down to just 2 workouts a week. And all of a sudden they're like, holy shit, like I'm able to push myself so hard in these workouts. Like I didn't know I could lift this heavy. I didn't know I could push this hard. You know what I mean? So it's because before they were never recovered for their sessions, man. And the reason why being able to push hard and like the reason why it's important to go into your workouts fresh and recovered is that training hard is fundamentally what stimulates muscle growth. So it doesn't matter if you're in the gym 5 to 6 days a week if the workouts themselves lack quality and you can't push your sets very hard in those workouts. Because you have to push your sets close to failure in order to actually stimulate muscle growth. Because pushing sets close to failure is what creates the required stress in order to actually stimulate adaptation. So a lot of men just think they're being productive by being in the gym 5 days a week, but they're never pushing their sets close to failure because they can't. Because their CNS is not recovered, their muscles are not recovered. They're just not recovered enough to be able to push hard. Now here's the thing. What I just said doesn't only apply on the macro scale in terms of your weekly workouts and making sure that you have plenty of rest days between sessions in order to recover and grow and actually go into your workouts fresh, recovered, and with the ability to actually stimulate growth. That also applies in the micro scale in terms of within the workouts themselves. So as I said, giving myself more rest days each week allowed me to go into my workouts fresher and more recovered, and that allowed me to push a lot harder. However, the next discovery that I had made after I cut down from 5 to 6 workouts a week down to just 2 to 3 was that I also learned the importance of keeping the workouts themselves brief in terms of doing fewer exercises and fewer sets. So you might have noticed with the example routine that I showed you earlier, you were only doing like 5 to 6 exercises per workout and only 2 sets per exercise. And that's very low volume compared to what most people preach in the fitness space. And the reason for that, and this was the big discovery I had, is the trade-off between volume and intensity. So early on in my training journey, I landed upon this guy named Arthur Jones, and he had a saying which completely rocked my world at the time, where he said, you can either train long or you can train hard, but you can't do both. And so what he means by that is that there's a trade-off between volume, aka the number of exercises and sets that you're doing in each workout, and intensity in terms of how hard you push and how close you push your sets to failure. So what he discovered was that if you do high volume in each workout and you do a lot of exercises, a lot of sets, you can't push as hard. Your effort and focus are diluted. Whereas if you do less volume, you reduce the number of exercises and sets that you're doing, you can put a lot more effort into these exercises and sets. So let me draw out an example for you here. Let's say that you're going into an exercise in your routine and you're doing five sets and then 2 sets. So with these 5 sets, you might not even know this. You might not even realize this consciously, but you're going to be holding yourself back. You're going to be conserving your energy intensity because deep down, oh shit, I got 5 sets to do. I better conserve my energy and intensity in order to get through all of these sets, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to put maybe 60% effort into these sets, if you're lucky. But if you flip the script and you do 2 sets instead, what are you gonna do? You're gonna approach those 2 sets with a completely different mindset. It's gonna be a mindset of, oh shit, I only have 2 sets. I better make these 2 sets count. And fundamentally, on a subconscious level, you know that you don't have a ton of sets to get through, so you know you can put more effort into those sets. So what you're gonna do is you're going to be putting 100% effort into these 2 sets. And what do you think stimulates more growth? 5 half-assed sets where you're leaving 5 reps in the tank, or 2 hard sets where you put 100% effort into them? I'll give you a guess here. This is way more productive because remember, what stimulates muscle growth? Training hard, pushing your sets close to failure. It's only the last final 5 reps of any given set that actually count towards stimulating growth. So I don't give a shit if you're doing 5 sets. If you're leaving 5 reps in the tank on each of these sets because you know you have so many to get through and your effort and focus is being diluted, it doesn't fucking matter. But if you're doing 2 sets and you push those 2 sets all the way close to failure and you squeeze out those last final tough reps as a result of doing fewer sets, that's going to be much more productive for stimulating muscle growth. Now, the third reason why this full body twice a week setup is so effective for men over 40 is better progression. So gaining muscle fundamentally requires constantly striving for strength gains. Over time, you need to add weight and or reps to your exercises. And if you don't, your body will not change. And that's because your body at the most fundamental level is an adaptation machine. So the current weights that you are using in your training will at some point not be challenging enough and will not produce enough tension to stimulate further muscle growth. So in order for your body to continue gaining muscle over time, you need to increase the tension that you are subjecting your muscles to. And the only way that you can do that is through progressively overloading your exercises and sets, through adding weight and or reps. And so fundamentally, guys, to do this, to achieve consistent progressive overload to where you are gaining strength and thus gaining muscle, you need to go into your workouts fresh. See how everything ties back to recovery? Because it's really the most important principle in weight training, because without recovery, nothing works. So like everything that we're basically talking about here stems from having more recovery. If you have more recovery time between sessions, you go into your workouts fresh and recovered. That not only allows you to train harder, just like we talked about, but it also allows you to push into new poundage territory, to add weight to the bar over time. The amount of guys that I see at the public gym over 40, like guys in their 40s, 50s, 60s, who lift the same weights every single week and look the same every single week blows my mind. This is why so many men over 40 are stuck. They train too often, and therefore they're training unrecovered, and that's making progression impossible for them. It's making it nearly impossible for them to actually add weight to the bar over time, because it's so hard to achieve progressive overload, to add weight to the bar, to fight for more reps if you are fatigued and tired and not recovered from the last workout. So most guys over 40 just can't achieve progressive overload. Like the amount of times I get questions like, Rio, is progressive overload like even practical for men over 40? Like, does it even work? It's like, dude, it absolutely works. You're just not training properly. You're not recovering enough. Like, it's so simple, man. Like, just have more rest days between your sessions, and now you're gonna go into your workouts fresh and recovered, and you're actually be able to add weight to the bar and get stronger over time. You know, this is why less is more, man. Like, I have so many clients who are coming to mind right now who were training on conventional bodybuilding routines before working with me. They're working out 5, 6, 7 days a week, and they were completely stuck. And they were like, man, like I think I'm getting too old for this. You know, I don't think I can add weight anymore. And then as soon as we drop them down to just 2 workouts a week, they start seeing progression every single week, every single workout. You know, my dad's story is coming to mind right now. My dad's 53. He's been following this exact method for over 2 years now, and he's achieved a ridiculous body transformation. And I remember, especially early on, you know, he had this thing where he was like, Rio, like I'm gaining strength every single workout. Like this can't be practical. This has to end at some point. And I'm like, dude, this means you're training properly, right? Like the biggest indication that your training isn't working is you're not gaining strength. You should be able to see weekly or bi-weekly increases in your strength. And if you're not, I guarantee you it's because you're overtraining, you know? So like that story with my dad, that's something I've seen with many of my clients. You know, all of a sudden they drop to doing less workouts and they start gaining very consistent strength. It's because they're finally recovering. Now, I know a lot of you guys are probably finding this very hard to believe. It's probably very hard to believe that you can build an amazing body training just twice a week, because the fitness industry has brainwashed everybody into thinking that you need to train more to gain more, and that if you're serious about building muscle, better be in the gym at least 5 days a week doing 10 to 20 sets per muscle group. We have been wired to believe that by the fitness industry, because that's been the fitness industry's marketing message since the 60s. But let me tell you something that might completely shift your paradigm and give you some peace of mind and perhaps add more credibility behind what I'm saying. So before the steroid era started in the 60s, which means before guys relied heavily on steroids to build their bodies, men built their physiques training just 2 to 3 times a week on basically this exact setup, on just full body workout routines. So I didn't just pull this out of my ass. This is where a lot of this information comes from. It's from the pre-steroid era fitness in the 40s and 50s, when physiques were a product of sound fitness practices rather than drug abuse. The big difference between these two eras is that in the pre-steroid era, in the 40s and 50s, they understood the importance of recovery when you are natural, when you're not taking performance-enhancing drugs. Now, I'm not saying guys from that era didn't take anything. I'm sure they took something, but it's obviously they took a lot less shit than the physiques nowadays, than the bodybuilders and the influencers take now, right? They relied much less on gear use and much more on actually training properly. And then the steroid era started in the 60s. That's when bodies became enhanced. That's when physiques were basically a product of drug abuse rather than sound fitness practices. And what do steroids do? They give you superhuman recovery abilities. They allow you to recover fast and easily from very high volumes of training, and they allow you to recover really quick between workouts. And coincidentally, this is when 6-day workout routines were born. Why do you think that is? Because bodybuilders realized that they could handle more volume and train more often and get more gains as a result because of steroids. Starting to see how this sort of has pieced together? Like this is how it works. You know, a lot of people just talk out of their asses. They don't understand the history of the fitness industry. It's really funny. Everybody shits on this, and it's like, dude, this is how men built their bodies before steroids were like so prominent in the fitness space. You know, so just keep that in mind. Like, this is the rediscovered way that men used to build their bodies. And those bodies, in my opinion, are a lot nicer looking. Because I don't know about you, but that fucking Ninja Turtle appearance from steroids is not the most attractive thing ever, right? So if you follow this method, you can build a very impressive body naturally. In fact, this is how you have to train if you are natural, because unless you're taking steroids, less is more. If you take steroids, sure, you can train 6 days a week, you can do endless volume, but when you're drug-free, you have to approach things with a completely different mindset. Now, the fourth reason why full body twice a week is so effective for men over 40 is that it is more sustainable. So consistency beats intensity any day of the week. And honestly, guys, the reason why I have so much conviction in my system and what I teach and what I sell is because the amount of messages I get from my clients saying like, Rio, I could never stay consistent with working out until I found this method. It's so flexible, it's so sustainable, I only have to be in the gym 2 hours a week total. So it is such a sustainable system, and consistency, which is the ultimate ingredient for success in pretty much anything, stems from sustainability. The more sustainable the system, the more likely you are to stay consistent with it. This is what I've seen with so many of my clients. Like I literally have like an app interface where I can see what my clients are doing. I can see when they log their workouts. I can see what they're doing. And like the amount of like they're all doing their workouts. You know what I mean? And that's more than most people can say. A lot of people don't work out. Like, you know, all this optimization and all this shit is great and all, but like a lot of people just struggle to actually be able to get their workouts in. And that's not a problem for my clients because it's such a sustainable method. It's 2 workouts a week. Like, who can't stay consistent with that? You know, and the story that's coming to mind right now is my dad's story specifically. My dad, as I said, achieved a ridiculous body transformation over the last couple of years following this method. And he credited his success to the flexibility of the system. I did an interview with my dad. It was sort of a case study video where we talked about how he was able to achieve the success he did. And he said, I wouldn't have been able to do it without the flexibility of this system. Because my dad's not the type of guy who just loves going to work out. You know, he's got other shit to do. Like, he's a busy guy. He's got a family. He's got work. He's got other things that he'd prefer to put his time toward. So if it wasn't for the fact that he could train twice a week, he wouldn't have stayed consistent. He wouldn't have done it. He literally said it himself. You know what I mean? So that flexibility, like the ability to have 2 workouts each week and just be able to flip them around, like depending on your schedule, is so beautiful. You know, if you have to miss a Monday workout, you push it to Tuesday or you push it to Wednesday, no problem, because there's only 2 workouts. It's so easy to shuffle around, you know what I mean? So like the flexibility of this system just makes it so sustainable, and that sustainability leads to incredible consistency, and consistency leads to incredible success. Now, if you're over 40, chances are you're similar to my dad. You have a family, you have a career, you have other things that you would rather put your time toward. You'd rather spend more time with your family. You'd rather, you know, do other hobbies, spend time with friends. Like there's so many other things that you could probably be putting your time toward. You likely have tons of responsibilities, you have limited time, and you know what's even more true is that you're not a bodybuilder, man. I'm trying to really contain my swearing nowadays, guys, as you can see. I hope you guys are noticing that. But you're not a bodybuilder. This is not how you make your living. So if you could get the job done with 2 workouts a week instead of 5 to 6, you would have to be crazy to not do that, man. We have limited time on this earth. If you can get the job done with 2 workouts a week and you can avoid having to like live in the gym, then that's obviously the more logical route to take. You know what I mean? So the problem with most fitness systems ultimately is that they just don't fit your life. And this plan solves that. This method fixes that because it's so practical. It fits into the busiest of lifestyles. Like no matter how busy you are, you can sustain this. And you know what's even more beautiful? This is another thing I hear from my clients all the time is that, Rio, I finally enjoy working out. Oh my God. I used to hate working out. It used to be a chore. But now that I'm only working out twice a week, I love working out. The workouts are like the highlight of my week. And you know how amazing that is for me to hear? I love that. It's music to my ears. The reason why is because absence makes the heart grow fonder. If you're in the gym every day, it becomes a chore. It's no longer enjoyable. It's like, fuck, I've got to go work out. I've like, you know what I mean? It becomes this thing that you dread. But if there's only 2 workouts a week, you have 5 days where you're not working out, and that makes it so that you actually look forward to your workouts. And ultimately, that's the biggest win here, because if you actually enjoy working out, the inputs in terms of hitting the workouts takes care of itself. You're just going to stay consistent because you enjoy it. That's the ultimate goal here, guys. Right? So that's why the system's so effective. That's why I believe in it so much. Yeah. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, you're gonna love this video right here where I actually take you through one of these full body workouts so that you can see what it looks like in the gym.